This episode features First Nations knowledge as told by First Nations storytellers. The producers recognise that the stories and information contained in this episode are owned and maintained by First Nations communities. We thank them for their generosity in sharing their stories for everyone to hear. Listeners, please also take care. This program contains the recorded voices and names of people who may since have passed away. Welcome to the Landbridge podcast. I'm Lucinda Horrocks. This episode explores the spiritual and cultural connections to Landbridge country, which have been maintained by the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the Palawa of Lutruwita, Tasmania, despite the violence and destruction that followed British invasion. This is a conversation with Fiona Maher, Palawa woman and Pakana Sea Country Ranger. Fiona lives and works on Tayaritja, Cape Barren Island, which forms part of Tayaritja, the Furneaux group of islands, an archipelago of over 40 islands northeast of Lutruwita, Tasmania, in the eastern Bass Strait. Between about 43,000 and about 14,000 years ago, these islands were high ridges on the eastern edge of a vast grassy plain connecting mainland Australia to Lutruwita, Tasmania. This interview took place in Nipaluna, Hobart in 2023. If you're interested, you can also watch parts of the interview in the Landbridge documentary film, which is freely available to view from the Landbridge website at thelandbridge.au. The full hyperlink to the documentary is included in the program notes. Now over to Fiona. Fiona, thank you so much for letting us join you. Would you like to introduce who you are for our viewers?
Yeah, I'm Fiona Maher. I currently live out on our islands out in Tayaritja, which is Bass Strait, up at Tayaritja, Cape Barren Island. I've been there for probably about 14 years now. Grew up in Launceston. Fighting for our rights of our people all my life, and when we had land return, our first one was 1995, we had some pastoral land returned to our people, and then Tayaritja, Cape Barren Island was returned in 2005, and that drew me home to then live on the land that, you know, we'd fought for all of my lifetime, yeah.
And what sort of work were you doing on Tayaritja?
Well, I worked at the Cape Barren Island School for 10 years, and probably in about my 6th year there, I joined the Tayaritja Rangers. So we got funding to set up a ranger program there. So I was in the establishment phase of that ranger group, and I stayed with them for 7.5 years doing land management work on Cape Barren Island. And then I just needed to change, so I went over to the Pakana Rangers. They were funded for an IPA Sea Country project, which is Milladina Muka. So sea country, and I just decided I needed a change, and I joined the Pakana Rangers, who manage all our IPA lands out in the Furneaux group. Those islands are Badger Island, Chapel Island, Big Dog Island, Babel Island, and Lungtalanana, which is Clark Island, and we also had Waibalena returned to our community as well, which is on Flinders Island.
What's an IPA?
An Indigenous Protected Area, that's what an IPA is called. So they were declared as IPA lands in the mid-1990s. And they just have separate funding. They're pretty special places for our community IPA lands. Chapel Island and Big Dog and Babel Island are mutton bird rookeries. So mutton birding is a pretty important cultural practice to our people. And I think Babel Island may even be one of the biggest rookeries in the southern hemisphere. So they come there to breed, and we go every April to harvest the young chicks, and then they go on their migratory flight again early May, off to the Bering Sea, up around Alaska and that, down through the West Pacific, and they come back home again probably September, late September, early October. They'll pick their burrow. A lot of them usually come back to their own burrow there, and mate up. They then go on a little honeymoon and out in the eastern side usually of the island and down to the Southern Ocean. They have a good feed, then they come back and lay their egg, usually between the 24th to 27th of November. It's pretty much clockwork. And then that chick will hatch in January, and then the bird, they share feeding that bird, and then probably the last 4 weeks they're left on their own, the chicks, to fend for themselves. They've got enough food to survive on, and that's when we harvest them. And then once we finish the season, they'll go out, usually to the continental shelf, meet up with the parent birds, and then off they go on their migratory flight again. And during that migratory flight, they never touch ground. They're a pretty amazing bird. And we've practiced mutton birding for, decades, a long, long time. And it's an important cultural practice. It brings our community back together. At that time of year, everyone loves to go off birding and being together and all doing the same thing. We all love it, yeah.
Where are these islands? Where is Babel Island and the other islands that you mentioned, if we're thinking about?
So the Furneaux Islands, they're situated off the northeast tip of Tasmania. Probably, I don't know how many kilometres it would be off the mainland of Tassie, but between the northeast of Tassie and Gippsland, sort of closer to Tassie though than Gippsland. And there's, I think, about 52 islands in the Furneaux group, and there are a lot more mutton bird rookeries there, but we'd hope to have those returned at some point in the future so that we can manage them like we do the islands that we have now. Yeah.
It's amazing to me to think about those islands as, like, over 10,000 years ago, they were once high points and it was land.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a land bridge between Tasmania and Gippsland. And if you look on a map of that land bridge, you can see that we're up on higher ground to the deeper water. You can almost see where that land bridge went through. The mutton birds, though, with the rookeries, I think they've always been there anyway. They would have just been on lower lands, and as sea level rose up, they moved with the vegetation, and they're just on a higher ground now than what they originally were, but I'm pretty certain they would have always been there. Yeah. We had different names for the birds. So today in Palawa, we call them Eula. A lot of people call them mutton birds. Scientists will call them shearwaters. a lot of our old people, when they were introduced to English, and that would call them moonbirds. There's a connection there with mutton birds and the moon. They'll usually take flight on a full moon at the end of the season. So we think they're pretty connected to the moon and tides, and just like our people, you know, there's no disconnection for us between land, sea and sky. And I think that's much the same for our little Eula. Yeah, they're connected in the same way as us, yeah.
And a little bird that travels amazingly far, like you were just describing.
Thousands and thousands of kilometres they fly, and I think it's pretty amazing that they can come back. If you see one of our islands, they're just covered in tussock grass. To be able to find a burrow, their own burrow within that system is just amazing. We don't know how they do that, but yeah, it just blows your mind. I suppose it's in their memory, same as us finding our way home. They tend to find their way home too. And it's really nice being out there in rookeries when they do come home, because they go out all day feeding, and then just on dusk of a night they'll fly in. You could sit in a rookery for a couple of hours and there'll be thousands upon thousands of mutton birds coming into their burrows. Quite often they'll just come really close by, really nice and quiet when they're coming in. And a lot of them will more or less just crash land in the rookery. Yeah, just on dusk, you can look out into the sea and you'll see a big black cloud on the water. You sit in a rookery just on dusk, and then you'll see thousands upon thousands of mutton birds coming in of a night to their burrows. They fly really, really fast, but really quietly. But they're determined to get to where they want to go. So quite often you'd be ducking, because they're really close. Their burrow's just here and they're just coming past you. But it is a beautiful sight to see, thousands and thousands of mutton birds. And you sit there and probably over 2 hours. If you go to do that, you stay in that rookery, because, you'd be dodging birds on your way out of that rookery otherwise.
So they're pretty special places, and that whole region, those 52 islands of the Furneaux group, and the name that you gave was
Tayaritja.
Tayaritja.
Yeah, that's what we call all the islands in the Bass Strait, is Tayaritja. Yeah, that's our name for it. Yeah.
Why are they so special?
Well, for me, I feel really connected to our old people there. I don't know if you know the history of Waibelena. It's where they rounded up our people on mainland Tassie up into the northeast of Tasmania, and that a lot of us come from that area in the northeast. They exiled our people out to Waibelena, and that was a settlement over there where they almost imprisoned our people. And because they were so taken from their homelands and that, a lot of them died, and they became in contact with white people with disease and the cold, and a lot of them died, and there was only so many of our people left then, and they were then taken to Putalina at Oyster Cove, and then a lot of them died there. But with the Waibelena days and that, they were sealers had come to Tasmania, sealers and whalers. So on Cape Barren Island, Kent's Bay, that was the second settlement in Australia. So there was Sydney, and then you had the sealers and whalers that came into Kent's Bay, sealing. A lot of those sealers kidnapped, stole our women, and they lived on different islands within the Furneaux group. They were our women that weren't taken back to Putalina or Oyster Cove, and that's where a lot of our families originate from, those women. So I think for me, it's the place I feel closest to our people, even though my homelands would be the northeast of Tassie. Through what happened throughout history, I feel closer to them there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like places that were prisons, but also where culture survived.
Absolutely, culture survived, yeah. So mutton bird's one of our cultural practices. Also shell stringing. So the beautiful shell necklaces you see made of mariner shells and different little baby shells, that practice continued on through women and families that were out in the islands. So that's a pretty special cultural practice as well, and all those knowledges came down from our old people, so it makes it even more special. Yeah, to know that they were collecting on the same beaches that we're collecting on today, and we're still making the same things. We know all about the mutton birds because those knowledges have been handed down and continue to be handed down. Yeah.
It sounds like an amazing place, amazing. So significant on so many different levels.
Yeah, we feel at home there. And it's really important that, with land return, that Cape Barren Island is the only return piece of land that our community are living on. There's no permanent residents on our other islands because, we've got rookeries and that. You're not going to want to live there. So it's beautiful to have a community, to our Aboriginal community, living on our land again, like our old people would have. That's pretty special as well. Yeah.
Could you explain to our viewers what Palawa means?
Well, Palawa for me is, I describe it as that's sort of what I'd call a group of us, a Palawa people. We are Tasmanian Aboriginal people, we are Palawa people. Pakana for me, I'm a Pakana ranger, but I'm a Palawa woman, would be more of an individual way of saying Tasmanian Aboriginal people would be, I'm a Pakana of the Palawa people. Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah.
And the Palawa is the whole of those nations of Tasmania that were... Yeah.
It's a description for all of our people today in Tasmania. Yeah.
You mentioned before about the sea, the sky, the land as a way of thinking about country. Could you explain a little bit more about what country means from a Palawa perspective?
Well, we are country, just like land, sea, water. We're all part of the one system. What happens on land will affect the sea, or in turn what happens in the sea will affect the land. It'll also affect our health, what goes on there. Same with the sky. So we're all one, really, yeah.
And you're working on Sea Country IPA projects at the moment. What's Sea Country?
Sea Country is all the surrounding waters, even all of Tasmania, but we're just focusing on our area, at one area at the moment, and so it's all the sea that surrounds our islands out in the Furno group, and the strong connection we have with that and the intertidal zone. So we're known as shellfish eaters, so that's where we find a lot of our foods are in that intertidal zone, like werrinas, limpets, muttonfish, or you might call muttonfish abalone, crayfish, limpets. So the intertidal zone is a huge food source for our people. Then on land, you know, we'd eat wallaby, whatever, yeah.
Why is it important to think about sea country as its own thing that needs conservation?
There's so much going on. For me, like our land was like raped of resources, which is really upsetting for our people. A lot of it was taken unsustainably, and that. The same now is happening in our sea country. We've got, you know, a lot of development happening in that area, or people wanting to develop or industrialise our sea. So we've got wind farm proposals, gas and oil exploration and drilling, fish farms, whether that be salmon farms or it may be seaweed farms. And a lot of those projects, a lot of them are international companies that want to come in, develop whatever, make their money off it, and thanks very much, see you later. And they don't tend to care about what goes on for the local people there or what they want. We want to keep the Furno Islands in the pristine condition that they are, and we don't feel that, you know, people have a right from another country just to come in and destroy that. Around the Furno, it's like a big breeding ground for shellfish and fish, and we've got 50% of Tasmanian's seagrass beds are throughout our islands, and they're really important for fish and for molluscs, for everything really to be grown. It's like a big breeding area, and we don't want that destroyed, no.
Why are you so passionate about caring for country?
I'm so passionate about caring for country because I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to go and live on our land if they choose to, and for it to be in a healthy state, to leave behind for them healthy country, healthy waters, and give them a choice in that, rather than have a choice taken away by some big multinational company. Yeah.
Going to the next questions, which is about this idea of the land bridge and connections to that deep past. Is it even right to talk about it as a past landscape? How would a Palawa perspective see the land that's now underwater? How is it viewed?
Well, the land bridge is still there, as it always has been. Our people walked, lived, birthed on that country. So it's special to our people. It's always been used up in the northeast of Tasmania, where that land bridge used to be. That was our homelands. We have burial grounds there, very significant sites for tool making, all sorts of cultural practices in that area. And yeah, there's been sea level rise and that, but that land mass is still there underwater, and a lot of our cultural artefacts, our old ways of living and that are still down under there, on the, under the sea floor. So it's still part of us. Always has been, and it always will be. Yeah. We could get sea level rise again. It doesn't mean that those areas today aren't going to be as special to us because they're underwater, because they're places we've always known. Yeah.
So magic. It is. Are there any particularly special places when you're talking about the land bridge connections?
We know of sites within the Furno Islands, some pretty old sites that have been found, and there's been archaeological digs, and typically of people trying to prove what we already know, but we know there's separate sites and that, but for me the whole area is a special place. Yeah, can't just pick one area out because the whole lot of it's special. Yeah.
I love that because it's its own place. It's still, like you said before, it's still there.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there any stories that connect to that?
Not any that I know of stories between Victoria and Tasmania. I don't know much about way back then. There is some story, but I don't know it, about the Great Southern Star that guided our people across that land bridge, and there was a Great Southern Star. But me, myself, I don't know that story, but I've heard of it, yeah.
I suppose with the history you just described, the recent history, it would have been very hard for stories to be handed down.
Absolutely, because when our people were exiled out to Waibelena, I forgot, what was you talking about?
I was talking about how did... I guess the question was, what stories survived. Some stories survived, but not all of them could. Because
when they rounded our people up and put them out at Waibelena, our people were forced to stop speaking language. They were stopped from practising culture. They were set up a church and were Christianised, and our people just were never allowed to speak their language again, or dance or anymore, or sing. So that's how a lot of those stories would have been lost from that practice. But with hands-on cultural practices, I believe, that was just put to sleep for a while. And going out on country, going out on the sea, being part of that place again, it just comes back. You reconnect with country, it's in our DNA, and those practices just come alive again, yeah, by being there, doing it, yeah.
You talk a couple of times about being a ranger. What is a ranger? What does a ranger do?
Oh, well, being a sea ranger, I travel around all of our islands. So we do a 10-day shift, 10 on, 4 off. We'll go to maybe out to Babel Island. We might be eradicating weeds out there, boxthorn. Because with land return, we also inherited a lot of issues with that. So obnoxious weeds, so it's getting rid of those to look after those rookeries like boxthorn. Sea spurge is another big one now, so that comes across from Western Australia through Bass Strait, and the seeds survive in seawater. So we're getting a lot of that sea spurge on our coastal beaches. That can have an impact on our shorebirds. So sea spurge will grow down the beach. In turn, we're going to have more sea level rise, so that'll crouch out those little shorebirds that nest on those beaches. So it's important with, water levels going up or big tidal surges that we get rid of that sea spurge so they can get to higher ground. Otherwise, I think, if we don't get rid of it, a lot of shorebirds will end up in lagoon systems. So we have a lot of lagoon systems down the east of Flinders Island and Cape Barren Island, Lunktalanana. They'll end up having to relocate because they'll just get crouched out. So there's weed management we do. We've reintroduced cultural burning. So we're currently on a 2-year project with fire sticks, and we've been learning and training in cultural fire practice and implementing that back on our lands to manage them a bit better with fire. Yeah.
We went and spoke to some ANU researchers last month who'd been doing a project on Long Island, doing deep core pollen samples.
Yeah. Simon Harbill, I reckon.
Simon, yeah. And is it Bonnie? His researcher.
Yeah. So we've had Simon from ANU, isn't it? Yeah, we've had him on Truwana, Cape Barren Island and Lunktalanana. He'd done a project there with us for a couple of years to have a look at the fire history on the island and how far that went back. And I think he went back something like 35,000 years that our people have always burnt our islands out there. So that was pretty amazing to be able to go back that far and to also see within the cores the vegetation changes over them thousands of years. And if you looked at one of the cores, there's thousands of years evidence of our people burning, and then there'd be probably that much at the end of the core, which is like the last 230 years where they stopped our people from burning, and it's very evident in those cores. So we know, even though the land bridge is, the rising sea levels are more recent, we have evidence of our people burning those islands for thousands upon thousands of years. Our old people would always burn their rookeries off after a mutton bird season too. So we've reintroduced that practice because that's what our rookeries and islands need for new growth, to maintain the health of those ecosystems, but also the animals within those systems. So it's really important, and to, try and eliminate some of those big wildfires. Yeah. Was
the fire practice a cultural knowledge that had been kept with community, or did you work with other communities too?
Oh, we worked with, that's with fire sticks. Yeah, which started out in North Queensland, I think. Victor Stephenson, he was part of that, and Peter Stanley. So we went off to some workshops and then just continued to attend those workshops probably over 7 years. We've been doing it now. And they've helped Aboriginal communities right down the eastern seaboard to teach people about those ecosystems and what's the right fire to use within those systems, where we don't burn, what we leave alone. So they've empowered communities and trained them to be able to do that practice again themselves rather than have someone outside come in and do it. We all do it together. Yeah, and we've met some wonderful people from all over Australia through those fire workshops. Yeah.
I'm fascinated with this knowledge sharing that your community has been doing, both so the fire sticks and also the work of the scientists at the ANU. Do you invite that? Do you as a community say, we want to understand this more and we want to know this more, and you bring in, or does it happen to evolve a bit more, less planned than that?
No, it's pretty planned out. Yeah, we've got 3 fire sticks workers now in Tassie, and we've got a mentor program running over 2 years, and there's about 30 Aboriginal community members. And the 3 fellas set up workshops with our ranger groups and interested community members, and we all get out on country and learn together. And that's to build our capacity to do that more into the future over all our lands. Yeah.
And how about working with scientists? How do you, because there's different knowledge systems, isn't it, that we're talking about, but how they work together? How does the science work with a community-based knowledge system?
I think a scientist gets into the real nitty-gritty of everything and it's almost sometimes like what we tell them they need to prove that we're right. That's a bit of the feeling we get sometimes. But it's great to learn from each other. So they're quite open in sharing what they know about those real intricate things. Tying that in with our local knowledges is really important. That helps them with their knowledges as well. And we know those areas, we know what's culturally significant, where we want them to be or we don't want them to be. What else can I say? We're currently they're helping us next year in February to map seagrass beds. So we're going to have them all mapped out in the Furno Islands because they're really important to us for our shells and our molluscs that live on those seagrasses. Also, they're big carbon holders, seagrass beds, as much as what a forest is. So they're important for that as well. But to see them aerially on a map and then will be brilliant. So we'll help them with that. But that ground truthing of what they're seeing from a satellite matches up to the knowledges we know on the ground. And to keep them safe in that mapping because we know our waters and islands so well. They could just say, we want to go here, here, here. We go, yeah, we can get you there, fine, but nah, sorry, we're not taking you there, it's too unsafe. Yeah, for whatever reasons, it might be rocky shoreline or what have you. A recent one we done was with IMAS in Tasmania here. So we were really concerned about the giant kelp forests and the loss of those down the east coast of Tasmania. And we knew we had some out in the Furno Islands, but they'd never been studied or identified really out in our area, so we knew where they were. So we had a few guys come in from IMAS, trained divers, and they went down and collected. They've taught us what spores look like on a giant kelp plant underwater. We identified those when the spores were ready to take, and then they came in and dived down and got some spores for us, and then showed us how to treat those ready to go back and to be kept, because they can stay viable for up to 50 years and probably longer. And the concern for us is that with the warming waters, that we may lose those remnant giant kelp forests out in the Furno. So we teamed up with these guys and have taken the spores, and they'll hold them in IMAS for us until, you know, we get a facility to put them, or they can stay there, what have you. But they're our spores. And if we were to lose those giant kelp forests, we can then use those spores to regrow giant kelp plants and go back out and replant them. So, yeah, that was a pretty special project for us, yeah, to know that we've got something in safekeeping, a bit like a seed bank.
Yeah.
I think a seed bank's just as important too these days, with all the wild bushfires we are having, and we're likely to have more of those, is to get seed banks happening right around Australia before we start losing plants through those big fires.
And how does a seed bank work?
It's just collecting seeds and then holding them in a facility, just, I suppose they'd be right temperature and nice and dry and that, so that they're there forever to be replanted if the need arose, yeah.
Because you're planning for a change, aren't you? That's what you're doing. I mean, we're talking about past change of sea level rise,
Yeah.
but we're in a moment where there's a lot of change and a lot of
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah, and I think we need to focus on things to adapt to those changes. I don't know how our old people would have done it in the past, how they adapted to sea level rise, but, you know, for animals and birds and everything else, we can too. It's important to, you know, retain seeds from healthy environments, to keep that ecosystem the same as what it is and healthy, rather than lose things, because that may have an impact on other things within that ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that rewilding that you were talking about before we started rolling, that is part of that too, isn't it?
Yeah, so on Luntalunana, Clark Island, we had a big bushfire there in 2014, and it was a pretty severe one. It killed a lot of the animals and plants and trees on the island. We've just had some small pockets left, and that vegetation now has grown back. It's about 9 or 10 years old now. A lot of feral cats there. That's another species that we inherited with land return. So we're locating the feral cats at the moment on island, and then we'll go in once we get some funding, hopefully, to eradicate them. Cats using all different methods, maybe Felix. We've got 4 Felixes there at the moment. We're trying out shooting, trapping, any means to get rid of those feral species off the islands. And then we'll follow up monitoring for a couple of years and make sure that we've got every cat. You know, they breed like rabbits. So we'd ensure we've got them all. And then we want to start reintroducing small mammals like antechinus, maybe echidnas, bush rats, what have you, wombats. That will help with their digging and that to bring back that healthy soil, and hopefully, you know, that will in turn lead on to more diversity within that ecosystem, and bring the country back to health. Yeah.
What would you like viewers to take out of this conversation about? It's been pretty broad-ranging. We've talked about the land bridge, we've talked about the work of rangers, we've talked about the specialness of country and the specialness of Tayaritja, those amazing islands. What do you want the viewers to think about?
A healthy future for all our younger generations, and that means healthy country, and I mean sea country and terrestrial lands. Development is not going to get as far. There's going to come a time when we're going to need all those things that are healthy in the system for our own survival. Yeah. If we keep pumping, you know, crap into our atmosphere and keep just industrialising this world, we're likely to die with the planet.
Yeah, too true.
Yeah.
Is there anything else
it's a concrete jungle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people wouldn't even put their, you know, they're so used to having shoes on and walking on cement. Take them shoes off and make a connection. Yeah. Yeah. Because we are part of all that. Yeah.
Is that what it's like for you when you go to those special places, making those connections?
Yeah. Yeah. Very special, yeah. Yeah. And you find peace. It's healing. It's medicine for us. Yeah. To get out on country, you'd never get lost anyway. You know, our people are there. We're looked after when we're out on country. It has the capacity to heal us. Yeah. Like an example might be you're a bit stressed out and that. You head for that water, you head for a walk along that beach and you'll be in the moment. And we need to be more in the moment and not worrying about, you know, what's coming or what we've done. We've got to live in the moment and appreciate it. Yeah.
And that's the end of the interview with Fiona. Thank you, Fiona. Next episode, join me for a conversation with researchers Dr. Stephanie Crabtree and Professor Sean Ulm, who talk about their computer modelling research into the migration pathways of First Peoples of Australia and Bass Strait. This program is part of the Landbridge Digital Story Project. A range of companion media, a documentary film and other stories are freely available to read, listen to, watch and share on the website thelandbridge.au. The Landbridge Digital Story was produced by Wind and Sky Productions. Creative producers were me, Lucinda Horrocks, and Jarry Nemo. The credits for this episode are detailed in the podcast program notes. The project was funded by the Australian Government through the Our Marine Parks Grants Program. Until next time, thanks for listening.